Hello from the headwaters of the Red River in southeastern North Dakota. 16,000 years ago, I would have been standing on the shore of an inland sea named Lake Agassiz. As Agassiz began to recede, rivers like the Bois de Sioux, the Otter Tail, Wild Rice, and Cheyenne merged with the Red. And at each confluence, where two rivers of equal size meet, mix, and become one, the Red would gain power, strength, yet keep all of the elements of its origin, as well as allowing all merging rivers to keep their essence, the silt, seeds, and memories from which it had come. We use the metaphor of a confluence to remind us how educators, from diverse backgrounds, philosophies, personalities, habits, and talents, often come together to subtly influence each other and make everyone a bit more competent and authentic in their practice of supporting people to become more fully human and make manifest the talents and intelligences that they have been given. My name is Derek Peterson. I grew up here and I live here on the land that my great-grandfather first broke ground in 1888. I want to show you a story. Do you ever wonder, like I do, why two kids who grow up in the same family, in the same house, in the same neighborhood and community, can have a totally different experience where one seems to go through life without any extra work, seems to do okay in school, avoid all the troubles, and the other teenager just seems to struggle and have a really hard time and get involved in risk behaviors. That we have a story that can explain that, and we call it the web of support. And what we've been able to do is we can measure how much support a teenager has and correlate that to their likelihood of thriving, their likelihood of being resilient, bouncing back when things get rough, as well as their likelihood of avoiding drugs and alcohol, suicidal ideation, school failure, etc. And we know that this love, we measure support, and of course, we can measure how much love a kid feels. When we take that support and run it through a prism of science, and the prism of science just means the best youth development research out there in the world today. And this research is almost irrefutable. It's from around the world. We have these indicators called protective factors that we break into the 7 colors of the visible spectrum. Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Roy G. Biv. So we call this a full spectrum approach to youth development. What we know is that red equals the rule of 5. Rule of 5 simply means that every teenager needs at least 5 caring adults in their life, and these 5 caring adults are called anchors. We didn't name them that. Teenagers named them that. Anchors can be the same as mentors, but all mentors do not become anchors, and certainly all anchors are mentors. These anchors can be mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, uncle. And if you've got mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, uncle, you know that you have a loving, intact family. You kind of won the lottery of life. You're very fortunate. Most families don't look that way anymore. You can also have mom and dad, 2 teachers and a coach. That's 5. You can have a single mom, mom's best friend, 2 people from the church, synagogue, temple, or mosque, and a youth employer. You can have a grandma, a grandpa, 2 youth employers, and someone from the church, synagogue, temple, or mosque. You can have foster mom, foster dad, 2 teachers, and a big brother, big sister from that program. What's revolutionary about our work is that the roles that these people play are not as important as we once believed them to be. What's way most important is how connected each of these 5 people are to the individual teenager, because these 5 people throw tangible strings to the web of support, tangible orange strings, which are things like food, things like feeling safe at home, feeling like they know where they're going to live and be in a couple of weeks or a couple of years, that their home is predictable and stable, that they spend time in a church, synagogue, temple, and a youth program. They volunteer in the community alongside other adults. These teenagers catch these tangible supports through relationship, meaning that a teenager who's more connected to anchors inside a school building will feel more attached to the school. A teenager who feels more attached to adults inside their home will feel more attached to their home. They'll get more benefit, more protective benefit from that home. Tangibles, all that means is they're easier to measure, easier to see. Yellow are intangibles. Intangibles are just as important as tangible supports, and we know that just because something is hard to measure or maybe impossible to measure doesn't mean that it's not important. There are many important things in our lives that are not measurable, yet are critical to our health, happiness, and our well-being. These intangibles, things like courage, things like integrity, humility, honesty, compassion, persistence, perseverance, those are caught by the teenager from adults who model and throw those strings. Teenager catches them, holds them, and then uses those strings, courage. And so, for instance, if I asked you, what does your courage look like? How much courage do you have? You would probably describe the courage that you caught from key significant adults in your life. If we have a teenager who doesn't have key significant adults in their life and we ask them where they catch their courage, we may be surprised that they don't have as much courage as they would have had if they had more adults, a thicker web. These three traits are nurture, and nurture is a part of the nurture versus nature argument. And we know that nurturing is important. And what we talk about in our work is that nature comes through nurture, that it's not either or, it's and. And in our work, green is growing the balloon. And growing the balloon simply means that these innate tendencies came at birth. They're part of our DNA. They're personality characteristics, they're different intelligences and talents and gifts that we have that need to be grown in the world. They're characteristics that make us more buoyant and make us more pro-social to connect with other adults. What we want is, like we said earlier, this nature to be grown by and grown inside of this thick web of support. And so we know that teenagers in green come in different sizes. We have typical teenagers, 8 out of 10, 80%, just need a typical web. And we know that some teenagers are smaller balloons. All that means is that they need a little bit more support, more anchors, and they need to be thrown more strings and have those strings more catchable so that they can hold those strings as well. And then, of course, we all know teenagers who are very big balloons, very innately resilient. And all that means does not mean that bigger is better. It means that bigger teenagers are more likely to stay on top of any web that they have. Those kids are far less likely to fall through the cracks. Blue is scissors cuts. Scissors cuts, all that means is that there are attitudes and actions that teenagers do that are inside their control that can erode the connection between them and the adult anchor. Using drugs at an early age can create a gap, can erode a string. Hedonistic values, being rude, stealing, lying, cheating, those things actually erode the web of support right underneath the teenager. There's also things that can erode, scissors cuts erode the web that are outside of a teenager's control. Those things like divorce, those things like family moving, family unemployment, a dad or mom going to jail can become scissors cuts as well. What we teach in our work is that there are ways to repair scissors cuts, and our teenagers do learn how to repair the scissors cuts and how to reweave themselves a stronger web. Indigo is caring for the carers. And caring for the carers simply means that every one of these adults needs at least 5 caring adults in their life. And these 5 adults create stability and create resilience, increase the resilience of each anchor. And anchors who have a thick web of support are far more likely to be stable and able to give a web to the balloons, the teenagers that they support. And adults who have less of a web themselves are harder. It's harder for them to throw the strings because they don't have many strings of themselves of their own to throw. And so caring for the carers means that the people around each child, each anchor, needs a web of support of their own. Violet is social norms. And social norms are simply what is normal behavior and attitudes inside that community. Some communities have very gentle social norms, some schools, some youth programs, where when you come inside that community, inside that church, synagogue, temple, or mosque, when you come inside that school, you just take a breath of a sigh of like, wow, this is a safe place. This place is easy to make connections with. Youth and adults respect each other. The social norms blow across the web and are gentle and actually enhance the value of the web or keep it intact. Then we all have walked into some homes, some churches, synagogues, temples, or mosques, some schools where we think, wow, this is a rough place. And those winds are like tornadoes that can literally blow the balloon right off of the web. And so what we want to do is with our teenagers is have them understand their power to make positive changes, affect the social norms of their school, in their neighborhood, even in their homes and faith communities. That teenagers have a lot of power, a lot of self-agency to be able to affect the social norms that affect their web. And so that's the web of support. And what we know is that teenagers in the United States and Canada, 0 to 2 anchors, 38% of the kids have 0, 1, or 2 adult anchors in their life. We also know, thankfully, that 40% of the teenagers have 5 or more. And so what we want to do is move teenagers. We have really 2 Canadas or 2 Americas. We want to actually move more of these kids up into a thicker webbed world so that we don't have to bank so much on their green balloonness, on their innate resilience, that we can actually create a web of support for everybody so that the typical kids and the small balloon kids all have an equal chance to be resilient, to take risks, bounce back from taking positive risks, as well as avoid risk behaviors, suicidal ideation, drugs and alcohol, tobacco, vaping, etc. What I've just shown you today is a web of support that is real, it's measurable, it's meaningful, and thank goodness most people have one.